Well, it's Father Kempf here saying Happy St. Pat's weekend to you. Really, I think if you wear green, it makes you Irish, right? Anyway, three quick things. One, to all my friends in O'Fallon, St. Charles kind of area, or any place that was kind of hit pretty hard by the storms, hope you're okay. We didn't really get scathed at all here. I don't think it's divine intervention. I don't think that's how God does stuff. I really think it's the sheer volume of hot air that comes out of my mouth just kind of blows the storms away. So anyway, two things. One, we draw near Holy Week. Next Sunday, Palm Sunday. I love our Holy Week liturgies here, and you're certainly welcome to come. Holy Thursday night will begin at 7. Good Friday, I'll lead a version of the Stations of the Cross I wrote at 3. Father Leo will lead the 7 p.m. main service, and then our Easter Vigil and Easter Sunday Masses. It's all on our webpage. Maybe I'll say a further word next week, I don't know. But anyway, we decided today to record in church. It was kind of a different way maybe to just get the message across for what good it is. In any case, thanks so much for joining us. Here's the homily now. Today we hear Jesus say, "Unless the grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, it remains just a grain of wheat. But if it dies, it produces much fruit." What if Jesus said these words especially to himself? Oh yes, Jesus certainly said these words for us, but it would not surprise me at all to know that Jesus also said these words to himself so that he could hear them out loud and to be reminded of how true they are, and that he used these words to remind himself that they're true in part for these three reasons. One, to remind himself that the inner work that every person needs to do to be fully alive for this world, which is kind of a dying, this inner work is something Jesus would need to continue to do until the end. Two, to remind himself that it was worth it, because that work is always just so hard. And three, to prepare himself for the big dying, that cross of suffering and death that seemed to cast a growing shadow. Throughout his life, Jesus had done the truly crucial work of letting the grains of wheat in him die so that they could yield much fruit both in him and in his own heart, and also for this world he loved. Practicing those inner disciplines which allowed him to do things like embrace his own feelings while not letting them control him, dying to every person's temptation to selfishness and ego so that he could find joy in serving others, and doing the work to keep his thinking, his mind, and his heart open to be able to keep the bigger vision alive, right? This dream, which included everyone, including the outcast, the vulnerable, and the poor. And now it was becoming clearer to Jesus that the next grain of wheat to die would be his own body. His goodness would cost him his life. You see, Jesus had become a threat to the wallets and prestige of the powerful and protected who took advantage of the vulnerable. And the writing on the wall was getting clearer. Jesus would face great suffering and most likely death. Jesus, of course, did not very much like this. And on this day when we hear him say, unless the grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, we also hear that he was afraid, that he did not want to suffer and die. He says, I am troubled now, but what should I say? Father, save me from this hour. But it was for this purpose that I came to this hour. And even as he wrestles with this, we hear Paul describing today the tears in the eyes of Jesus as he did this. That's how deep was his anguish. Because of the inner work he had done, Jesus had learned to trust that the dyings were worth it, that they yielded authentic life. So as frightened as he was, today I think we hear him reminding himself, as he reminds us, that it's worth it. And that in ways he could not see or probably even fully imagine, this difficult, lonely, heartbreaking journey, this painful death, would make a difference for this world. In many ways, I think you and I are like Jesus today. Deep down, we know it's worth it to do the hard work of becoming more alive and free human beings. I mean, some part of us has seen the blessings that come from doing that work that lets those grains of wheat die in us. But it's still sometimes hard for us to remember that it's worth it. Sometimes it's kind of hard to trust that. And because it's sometimes hard for us, I'm going to leave this pulpit for just a bit and speak from my heart, this heart, in the hopes that you will hear words from that heart, that sacred heart. To all of you who are doing the hard inner work to become more alive and free and true, thank you. Working so that those grains of wheat in you can die is just so hard, isn't it? It's not easy to go to a counselor, get help for an addiction, work on that impulse to anger, ask feedback on how to be a better person. It's messy, painful work. But it's worth it, isn't it? It yields a better you for yourself and for this world, doesn't it? I mean, haven't you seen blessing from that work? I know that God too would say thank you for that. To all of you who are kind to that new kid at school, who are friendly to that clerk, respectful to that person that cuts the grass or cleans the floors, who include those that others might think different, isn't it a joy to see them? I mean, to see them as human beings, isn't that a delight? It is a conscious decision to do so, I know. But aren't you glad when you do? It makes your soul bigger, doesn't it? To all who care for a child with any form of disability, who have welcomed an aging parent or in-law into your home, who Make the effort to find time for that neighbor who struggles, for all who do the tough work to be good dads or daughters, moms or friends, to all who make the effort to listen really hard for that prompting of when it's time to speak and when it's time to be silent. Thank you, just thank you on behalf of all of us. Just thank you. To all of you who resist that urge to label people, to decide that people are just categories, those people who don't really matter. For all the ways you do the difficult work to expand your thinking and soften your heart, to remember that we are one human family, who instead of vehemently standing up for your rights, wrestle with how to care for the common good of all. It's so hard, but isn't it a blessing to know that you're a part of something so much bigger? With all my heart, I believe that God would say, thank you. Thank you for being like my son, Jesus. To all of you who do this crucial work now, the crucial work that Jesus did in his day, thank you. It's worth it, isn't it? Those sufferings that come from love, from being a good and loving person, it's really hard sometimes, isn't it? Today, Jesus reminds us, as he reminds himself, that they're worth it. That God notices all those dyings and is with us in them, using them to bring life. And I hope and pray that at least on some level you've already felt deep down how true that is. That you know that this work does yield a more free, a better you for a better world. Deep inside, you already know that it's worth it, don't